Well, for many years, people who have been flying on a piece of clothing can't sit straight, and that's going to be actually a rather non-serious looking.
Hiç uzun süre duramaz da kaykılırsam beni bağışlayın.
So I would like to apologize in advance for sitting very comfortably in front of you. So this is a tablet, right? I believe you were supposed to download a question, and you can submit your questions via this app. I have been asked to remind you of that.
Mekanizma aracılığıyla yazılı olarak.
Through that app, I will receive your questions, so I will be following that. Okay, so the people in the hall, provided that you won't be extreme, you will participate with your questions. Hopefully, I will deliver a speech which would not require any speech. Well, this session, the way I'm positioned, both what I'm going to tell and my style, but I'm not sure whether this speech is going to be adversely impacted by the way I sit, because I actually made a more serious presentation, or I was supposed to deliver it in a more serious fashion. Well, essentially we're going to start with human beings, with the definition of the human beings in philosophy. We have two definitions, both of which belong to Aristoteles. The first one is, the Greek does not belong to Aristoteles, but logon ekon is how it is known, but zoon logikon is the more accurate version. So zoon medikon in 19th century, which was translated into Arabic, ayna and natık, and that means a thinking creature. So the question, what is a human being? And one of the earliest responses to that question is, a man, a human being, is a living creature. So, well, some of people say that human is a hairy creature, or just like the definition of a human being is one who has two legs. You might think that that's rather arbitrary, and it's actually a very deceptive, and it's a very rushed, because you know, the definition stating that human being is a thinking creature. In the logic, science of logic, it is the highest form of definition. So there are definitions which used to be categorized like lacking definition, which is not full and thorough. So rather than saying human being is a living creature, you might say that it's a thinking object. Or an entity which is, or who is thinking, but that is rather erroneous. Let's say that, you know, let's omit a human being is a living creature with two legs, and then there is no separation from human beings from the chicken. Then the most ideal definition is actually the one which is combining the genus and it is one of the most overall, or the general, universal. And under that we have genome, or the species. So if we're talking about the genre or genome, you know how it goes in Ottoman. There is an Ottoman rule. That is Ottoman, and it can't be interpreted by the interpreters. So when we say Efrat-ı Nicabi in Ottoman language, which is a separate language, that states that it has to include it has to state the creatures. We can say that no individuals of the human family can be simply excluded. But now that we have mentioned genome, and we are actually the close genome, because you could say an object, a human being is a thinking object, but rather than that we said creature, because objects are living and non-living objects, and they're divided into the minerals, for example, but stones. Organic, inorganic is another form of differentiation. Therefore, in the full and ideal definition, according to the Aristotelian logic, so we use the close genome, and it has to be an inclusive definition, so that it includes all of the components inside the cluster. But just because of the fact that it is a large cluster, it's going to simply include the odd ones. Then you have to take the odd ones out. For example, horses are making horse sounds, or cats are living creatures which meow, and you can't simply, you are excluding the sounds or voices made by the other animals. But the definition for human beings, it includes everything, which means that you're going to exclude the non-human ones out of the clusters. That's why differentia is the differentiation which has to be mentioned. It is a living creature, but unlike the other ones, it is a thinking creature. Habditam, that is called the full definition, full and thorough definition. So I'm not going to bore you with the technical details. But after all, when we say that human being is a thinking creature, we're not talking about an arbitrary or random description. So we are making a definition. It's a blunt creature. See, that's a description. Why being blunt is not something belonging to your genome. So full definition has to feature the essential characteristics. For example, sitting calf is another definition, but in logic, that is not a definition. It is description. In Arabic, it is called as res. So either you describe or you define. You either describe, mainly when public describe, when they're talking over human beings. And today, when you look at the responses to my tweets today, people are worthy of being hated. But you can't simply use adjectives to describe human beings. You have to use self-adjectives. Not every adjective could be used. It's or he or she is a living creature wearing shoes. Therefore, the first definition I quoted by Aristoteles is the full and thorough definition of the human beings. Once you comprehend the content and the possibilities by a definition, that means that you have actually grasped the meaning of human beings. But then again, the definition living, that thinking definition, has to be grasped. That's the condition. Because the logikon is the descriptor, and that was translated into Arabic as natık, which is sort of a preach, and that could be very well translated or interpreted as the speaking or talking living creature. So among the living organisms, by the way, the plants are living organisms as well. Only the human beings can talk and can think. So I have objections into aspects, and this is what we see in the contemporary philosophy and the science. Many people find such definitions rather childish, and they oppose. The monkeys, aren't they thinking? What about the crows? Aren't they intelligent creatures? Okay, so talking is only a capability by the human beings. Animals cannot talk. I'm not saying this in the sense of establishing a communication. So talking, speech is possible through words. So by there's a difference between logos and phone. So human is a speaking, a talking creature. That's why we have logos, which is thought and mind. That's why we need to use two words. And from Plato and Aristoteles, these definitions were completely and obviously taken. So logos, speech is divided into two, inner speech and outside speech. So this is what we call thinking, which is the inner speech. It's thinking. And the only thing we call speaking is the external speech. Logos has a double connotation, double meaning. And that's where we have the biggest problem. And the philosophy gives you the capability to tackle such situations, such problems. It's giving you the capability to tackle that semantics.
So just like the speech is divided into two, logic is also divided into two. Intelligence thinking about the particulars, everyone can do that. Somebody who is smart, being able to think practically, for example, an accountant is able to think, but can he grasp? Can he understand? Because understanding is only possible when you not concentrate on the particulars, when you think of the universals, because everyone claims that they can think. Can a monkey think? Can a parrot think? So when you think of it, speaking and comprehension is unique to the human being. So what is the human being? What is a human being? A human being is a thinking being. A human being is a being that is speaking and thinking and comprehending. That's the first definition. Coming to the second definition, the philosophers have not paid too much reference to that, but Aristoteles pays reference to this in two ways. The human being is a zoon politikon, a political being. But the word political here, if you translate it into Turkish, is problematic yet again. Some people say human beings are political animals. That's very popular. The word politikon can be translated into Turkish in two ways. First, the human being is a societal being, like the bees, like ants. Apart from that, the human beings are political beings in the sense that they create states. So between societal and political is like the difference with the police. Polis in Greek cannot be translated into any language. Polis, if you translate it into city, if you say state, it's mutually exclusive. Can somebody please turn off the second microphone on the stage, on the rostrum? The two are interfering. There is a difference between the public and the state. The state is excluded from society, but if police belongs to the state and police belongs to the society at the same time, if the police is society, if the police is society, then these definitions are very problematic. Bureaucrats are executive citizens. We are non-executive citizens.
Yapan canlının içindeyiz. Yani özetleyecek olursak, insanın iki özsel niteliğini tanımlamış olduk.
So we have provided two definitions. We said the human being is a thinking, comprehending and understanding being. And secondly, the humans are societal and political beings. So 2 words in Greek, but 4 words that we have to use when we want to convey the same thing in Turkish. So I have a list. My students will know I've published my list today. Usually it's made up of 6 bullet points. What not is the human being? So what is the human being not? Instead of asking what is the human being? The human being is not a child. The child is not a human being. That's the most popular answer that's given. Why? Because in Latin law, it's impubades. The baby is a non-communicative or non-speaking being. No legal liabilities whatsoever, and it cannot speak. So if it cannot speak, it cannot be considered a fully fledged human being. And what's the opposite of that? Mefhumu mualifi. If a person is not a child, then it needs to be an adult. An adult, per definition, is a man. Adam in Turkish. It also exists in Latin and Greek. Being a man, being an Adem, being an Adam in Turkish. It means being in full possession of mental faculties. And the children, or the babies that cannot speak, cannot be considered human beings. And we separate the human being from one of its own. Children are not considered fully fledged human beings, not adults. That's also per law. Secondly, the human being is not a woman. According to Greek mythology, the woman was created after the human being was created, not after the man was created. Usually our kind, we keep on telling the tale of Adam and Eve as if the woman was created after Adam, after the man, but that is not true. The human being was created, and as a punishment, Zeus, after stealing the fire, is very angry. Prometheus steals fire, and Zeus becomes very angry, and Zeus creates woman as a punishment to the human being, not as a punishment to men, to the human being. First, the human being was created. This is why Adam, the human being in Turkish, was created. So this is as far as mythology goes. So this is why women are not considered human beings. Can somebody please switch off the second microphone? We cannot hear the speaker anymore. Can somebody please step on stage and turn off the microphone on the rostrum? The woman is excluded from logos, like a third kind, like the child. Human beings are not slaves. Slaves also are not in a position of logos. Intellectual capacities are lacking, or are said to be lacking in slaves. That's also something that Aristoteles says. Human beings are not free. So if you take away freedom, there is no human being left. Somebody who is lacking of mental capacities, of intellectual capacities, is not free. And if you are not free, then you are a slave. Well, I have heard that this and that is done in a particular way, or I've been told that. Who said that? An authority, or somebody who knows better. Somebody who knows better. So without intellectual capacities, you cannot become a fully fledged human being. So from an attachment to emotions, from an attachment to rumors and so on and so forth, you need to set yourself free, otherwise you cannot become a human being.
Niye böyle giyindin? Herkes
Why are you wearing those? Because everyone is wearing those. So what about you? And in a minute, I'm going to touch upon, I'm always talking about the triple conceptualization: identity, personality, and self. So here we fail to reach three of those. When we have personality, you cannot go to the self, that selflessness, knowing yourself. Again, it has something to do with being on the layer or the level of rationality. You know, looking at the world, interpreting the world from general hallucinations, it's like actually you're being a slave, a slavery to the object. You know, as far as you could see, you say, well, that exists. But just beyond that, you fail to see. Something happens to you. You are done something good or bad by a person you know. Maybe a good act, you are given a gift by that particular person. Or, you know, harming any object of yours or stealing anything from you. That's a bad act. Think of a kid, a stranger, giving a kid chocolate. Would he or she follow that? Yes. Why? Because there's chocolate, there's satisfaction. And the intention of that man, can she see that? That's actually just like that. When you see the object, if you fail to see the correlations, relations, when you look at the people, on what to what you have become a slave, the chocolate over there, or they might seem to be harming you. The doctor is giving you a better medication, or you refuse to get injected. Whatever you say, you merely see the injection going through under your view, but do you see the law, the function? No, because they can't be always perceived with the senses. You have to simply work your brain. I'm of course I'm being very superficial, very simplistic here in order to make effective use of time. Therefore, the general being stuck with senses means you are sticking with what is popular and you rely upon your only personal views. That's a sort of a form of slavery. So you need to have a comprehensive view. You are behaving, and why did you say that? Because my mom told me, my dad told me, my professor. So you are always submitting yourself to the authorities. Well, my late father used to tell me that all the time. I was young, I was 19, I was reading day and night. And he would tell me one thing, and I would quote from the books, showing him the references, and I would object to him. Or I would say something and oppose to him. And in order to mess with me, well, he said, she said, what do you say? He would ask me. You know, he was sort of he was ignoring my quotations and references from the books. Otherwise, they were so important for me. This page of this particular book, that author, that writer, I would quote him, the exact places. And Ömer said that, Imam Ebu Hanife said this. So, no, what would prophet human being say? And that expression belongs to my father, Hazreti Insan. Well, he said, she said, what do you say? I would be taken aback by that, actually. You know, that's an authority, I would tell him. You know, what do you say? Holy book, Holy Quran. What do you say? He would ask me. And, you know, is there any bigger slavery than that? Who am I? Who am I? So from that perspective, slaves are human beings as well. Well, there is still going that rationality, which is still going on. Animals are not human beings, which is obvious, because they lack the ability to speak and think. The savages, they're not human beings. And actually, that is, savages, or the wild, is a medical term. I wrote it. INSI is the opposite of that. So, wild means external, and actually it is used in a certain medical, and it is the original term INSI, from which insan, human, in Turkish was derived. And that is what is internal, inside the line, inside the cluster. And wild, or savage, so to say, it is outside the line, a certain, which has not been trained in the mountains, in the forest. So it's not who is in the plain, savage, wild. Well, probably it's not correct, but just to simply simplify the intention, because it's definitely not the exhaustive definition. It's just like the difference between the villager and the urban people, because one is in the midst of the nature, in the mountains. All the communication is with the ground, soil, snow, trees, plants. But, you know, the urban people, they have the communication with the gadgets, with the buttons, the television button, whatever you can think of. So, in the rural environment, we have a mental, a rational platform. Who is more intelligent, the urban person or the villager? Well, we call the villagers sometimes cunning. Why? Because they have an ability which has been sharpened, an intellect which has been sharpened by the will to survive in the nature. They have to combat the pesticide, the insects, whereas urban people have to combat with the other urban people. And that's why in the nature, in the mountain, in the plain or valley, you are guiding a flock, and a person who is a shepherd, well, obviously he is intelligent, but can he be intelligent so that he will become rational? That's in the city, in the conflict where because you have abstraction, that is a law. The shepherd looks at the sky and can simply list or name the stars, could give you a road description, or would know when the wolves would attack, which dog, where you are going to encounter them, how to simply guide the flock. But can he find the law for that? No, he can't do that. He can't abstract that. Well, he's based on his senses through which he connects with the nature. Well, based on the rational, when he gets into contact with the nature, we call it science. Therefore, human beings are not savage or wild. I made a differentiation. Actually, in the same bullet point, I could have mentioned those. Human beings are not barbarians, I said, if you remember. Wild and barbarian are separated from one another in anthropology. Probably you have read the book by Henry Morgan, one of the favorite texts of Karl Marx. Human life is divided into 3 phases. Henry Morgan accept this as a total of 100,000, 65,000 years on wild, 35,000 barbarian years, 5,000 the civilized years. So 64, 65 we're talking about. And now that time is calculated as 300,000 years. So the known history of human beings in 1 millennium, according to the assumptions, it has been increased to 300,000. So essentially speaking, a barbarian is the one who lacks Helen. Thucydides says that. Why don't we have barbarians in Homeros? We have Achilles. We don't have the Hellenic people. When we have the Hellenic people, we have the barbarians. Because barbarian means that there is no Hellenic. And in it's Ajam. In the Arabic, we call it for the Persian people in Turkish. Ajam means non-Arabic. That's where the Turkish word comes, Ajami, which is the Ruki or Nubi. This is also used for the animals. The animals which can't speak. Spiders, can they speak? They can't even make a sound, right? Or, we never get to hear that. Or, very interesting, hayvanın atık. Ibn Haldun uses that expression quite a lot. They mean human by hayvanın atık. When he uses the term hayvan-ı acem, the acem animal, the animals which can't speak, dogs, cats, all are falling into that group. But for insects or the animals, underground animals, that term is used for those animals. So for barbarian, those in Herodotus, in the context of Herodotus, which are making strange sounds, bar, probably like an onomatopoeic word. And Ibn Haldun gives a very mis-etymology, Berber, like the Barbary people, because he assumes that while they're talking like the Barbary people, he says they speak like barbarian. No, actually it is derived from barbarian, which is dating back to the Roman times. At least this is not Arabic, we know that. It means making strange sounds. However, there's a difference of barbarian from the wild. The wild lives in the forests, in rural areas, which is not the city. Whereas barbarian this life coupled with the technology, and culturally speaking, it's sort of a more advanced version of that life. I know it was not a very good sentence. So the difference between the barbarian and the wild is as follows. The wild, suppose that in Africa we have the untouched forests, people living in those forests could be called the wild people. However, barbarian, you could call them your next door neighbors. Barbarian, Syrian refugees, for example. They are coming to Turkey. 3 to 4 million refugees are hosted in Turkey. And how do they see Syrian people? For example, on ferry, they are sleeping on the floor. They are shouting, they are very loud. So don't you think Turkish people are treating them as if they are barbarians? Accepting them as less developed. Please pay attention. They don't see them necessarily as wild, but non-Turkish people, non-citizens, in the sense of foreigners, strangers. In barbarianism, unlike the wild connotation, even though there is a culture, you are still not feeling very close to that, and there is always this hint that it's not one of us. Okay, so what do we left? What are we left with? So if it's not a slave, human, animal, child, or wild and barbarian, if a person is not all of these descriptors, is not an angel either, and is not God either. Why he or she is not God? Angel is easy. Why he or she is not an angel? Am I an angel? You know, that's the question. Because angels lack bodies, because that's what we see in Christianity. They are accepted as pure spirit and pure intellect, pure mind. That's why they can't commit a sin. Because sinning is essentially because of the bodily desires and the strength. If there is no body, there is no desire, and there is no anger, there is no crime, there is no sin. Am I an angel? When one poses that question, and in Holy Quran we also see that, enel beşerin misakun, I'm a human being, beşer and insan. There is this essential difference between these two. Beşer means the small earth figurine made out of soil, and Adam is actually a small figurine. God simply breathed into his spirit, hence he became a human being, which means that God, Allah, gave him actually mind and his intellect. That's why he is not a mere mud body. So with his spirit, he has his body. So body and spirit, he has the full thing. And when he does not follow his mind, he is simply doing adultery, he is stealing, because he is merely following the desires of his body world. That's why he is committing a sin. And when we say that the human being is not a god, what are the things which occur to you? Well, God. Am I a god? When you ask the question, when one poses that question, what do you mean? The biggest feature of God is, well, he or she is capable of everything. So when a person would like to state that he or she is not capable, well, they say that, am I God? Am I capable of everything? No, I'm not capable of everything. I have my helplessness, and being a god has to do with the strength, and all the time I would teach this to my students, but not everyone is actually willing to understand that. You can't find one single line which is simply refuting the notion of atheism in Holy Quran, and in the mentality or vocabulary of the Holy Quran. You can't find anything which is refuting that or which is opposing to that. If you use the analogy and simply see that as a mechanism, it does not even acknowledge the archetype or the type of or the category of atheism. It has never even considered that someone who is not believing in the presence or existence of God. And then we have the non-believers, or the infidels, who have nothing to do with the atheists whatsoever. They are simply believing that they are committing a shirk, like they believe any other asset or there is another existence which is as strong as the God himself. Sami religions, for example, they are so sensitive because they are distributing the strength. For example, you can't believe that there is an equal or peer to God in the and you can't simply put any peer to the husband and to the leader. So this is, how the politics go. When you say that there is one God, then that means there is only one king or emperor. The reason is that the term Allah, that term parol Allah, and that is indeed the defined, the articulate version of the divinity. It comes from uluhiyet, it's derived from uluhiyet. And it is actually a power adjective. In tasawwuf, being divine and being Allah are two different things. And it doesn't necessarily mean that if you're objecting to the Godhead, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are objecting to the presence of God. Allah is understood as a proper noun. And when you say Tanrı instead of Allah, that's why people are offended, because Allah is a proper name. They believe that Allah is a proper name. It's not a generic name according to their opinion. Well, for example, his name is Yeşil, but you call him Green, and he would be offended. But it's the same thing. One is Turkish, one is English. So, well, it's my proper name. It's my individual name. Green is something else. It's generic. It's not proper. But in tasawwuf, Allah is an adjective. It's a level, actually. It's not a proper name. In mysticism, in Islamic Sufism. And it did not used to be Allah. Why? Because you have to have actually a subject so that there would be an Allah. You have to have ubudiyet for uluhiyet. You have to have submission for divinity. So I think it's a lengthy discussion. I'm not going to go into the details, but it's all about the power. And when human beings face Allah, it's actually a weakness. It's a helplessness, a situation of helplessness. And two definitions about the human beings have brought us to this discussion. So what is a human being is not. So by the way, these definitions change today. Today, we also have to add, human is not a machine. That equation has to be added. There is a consciousness, there is the spirit of the human beings, whereas the machines like that. In the West, ethics are now... You can't talk about the human ethics without considering the machines. So, the human beings have rights versus machines' right. So, if you take my photographs without my consent, I will sue you. Do I have that right? Well, or, he's taking the picture of mine or my house. Isn't that a crime? What about the interior of the house? Or tapping into the phone of someone in an illegal fashion. It's a crime, right? Yes. So the human beings have the rights versus machines. Can we say that? Yes. No, I'm not doing that. It's the camera who is doing that. No, you can't say that. But just mark my words. One day, we're going to start talking about the rights of machines versus the human beings. And you can't do this to the machines. If you break down your iPhone, maybe on behalf of iPhone, you will be sued. If you break my iPhone, I will of course sue you for compensation. And if you commit such a crime. But against on my own property, can I commit a crime? So between the machines and the human beings. Well, beating your child when I was a kid. The teacher, would they beat the students? Yes. Would anyone object to that? No. Why? Because there was this understanding that. Well, dear teacher, you have the flesh, I have the bone. And now you risk the, You risk being sued if you simply shout at the children. They are now accepted as human beings, children, whereas they were not in the past. Well, they're hitting then shooting, actually, they're killing their wives. But now, women is a human being, so in the category. All of the discussions on what a human being is and is not has to do with rationality. But now that we are talking about artificial intelligence, we have an intelligence, well, on an assumption basis, functions much better than the human beings. Well, then we say, the problem with the artificial intelligence. Can they cry? They lack emotions. They are very interesting movies. I'm not going to go into those. You are probably watching those. But the artificial intelligence is falling in love, loving someone or something. And there are some movies actually depicting that theme, which are very successful. So, now the conclusion. So, the conclusion about the human beings. At the very beginning, now going back to the definition at the very beginning. Thinking is always just circling and going back to the very beginning. Human being is a social and political creature which talks, which thinks. And here, in line with the theme and importance of today, the human being is not wild and a barbarian creature. So it's not wild and barbarian, and that means that it's a reference which is made to the ability to coexist with the other human beings. Well, they have to coexist because in the mammals, and human is a mammal too, so on its own, it can't survive on its own. Well, they can't simply, they need to get help from the other simply creatures. So, without further ado, if I have to summarize it, we can make a reference to the two organs. First of all, the hand. What is a human being? And one of the biggest differentiators in this respect is the hand, the extremity, the hand. No other animal has such an advanced hand, the cartilage, the finger, which makes instruments and tools. So that's the kind of specialty we have. That's one of the biggest differentiators in that respect. Therefore, actually, this is where the notion of labor is derived from that. And the second one is brain. Human being is a thinking and a speaking creature. And that's where the sociality comes, the social aspect. What does it mean to be social? Hand, labor, are creating the division of labor. Without the division of labor, we can't have a society. What is division of labor? Well, if we have division of labor, that means that abuse has already started. In the simplest and most innocent differentiation, or when people come together, those who are managed and those who are managing. But in the ideal situation, can we actually think of any society which does not have that? A communist society is like that. I wish we could remove that mechanisms of being managed and managing, but because of the social nature of the human beings, only when we have the conflict of being managed and managing, we have the social aspect of human beings, which has not been overcome yet. And the reason, is that the capital? Is it the effort and the capability, the talent and the efforts? Maybe they are the reasons creating such inequalities. Such inequalities are natural, which are in the end turned into cultural inequalities. That means that, according to the Platon description, which is very significant, just like the Noah's storm, just like in the Noah storm or hurricane, those who survive could only live at the top of the mountains after Noah. How do they survive? So that they are engaged in husbandry, animal breeding, and in isolation from one another. That's why the mountainous communities cannot establish states. They are very fond and avid of their own freedom, and this is where you get to have the highest form of liberation and freedom. They are very fond of their freedoms because there is no division of labor. Everyone has their own families. One is in this mountain hill, and still when you look at the mountains in Black Sea and eastern region of Turkey, from top to top they communicate with one another. Well, in very dire situations they might give each other a help, but a hand. But they're each responsible for their own houses, to what they owe their arches, their swords, their guns. That's why they say in the Balkan community, one of the mountainous societies is the Albanian people, the Kurdish people, the Georgian people, Armenian people. They are the mountainous people communities. In Italy, in Europe, we have those as well. In Toscana Valley, we have those, or in the Alps, Alp mountains, we have those. They are very fond of their freedoms. That's why they are very fond of their own arms, guns. Well, they say that was the biggest mistake made by the Ottoman Empire. They took away the guns of the Albanian people. That's why they rebelled. And that's where they got the first blow in the Balkan community. Why? Because you should not touch their guns if they're a mountain community. And once everyone is establishing their own rules and to be able to execute them, for an evolution, you have to have force. If there is no force, then there is no law. If you are drafting the laws, you have to be capable of punishing those who breach the law. Well, this is the difference between the law and the rule. You put a rule, if they breach it, then you can't punish them. So, for example, you are prohibited to speak while I'm speaking, or we're going to take turns. But suppose that two people are speaking to one another. I told them to be quiet. He said, well, I'm not going to be quiet. Well, what are you going to do? But here, if there was the president of Turkish Republic, you would be snatched by the bodyguards, and that would be a crime, because it's a law and rule in separate occasions and cases. One is turned into a crime. That's why the mountainous communities are punishing the offenders themselves. And then they make progress. They are coming to the valleys, to the forests, and still there is no agriculture. There is this garden agricultural activities as called by the anthropologists. They're not even selling it. No bazaar formation, no farmers market. And then they come to the plains. And then there's where they start the division of labor. And with the division of labor, there's so many things to do.
And this is how one group is turned into a slave, a group of slaves, together with division of labor. The same holds true for the house. There is the husband, there is the father, the mother, there are the children, and there is division of labor. So whoever earns the income sets the rules, right? At least that's what they say. Who is the bread giver? Well, whoever is going to inherit the cows and the sheep and the goat, that person is going to be the race. When they work the field, the cows and the cattle is inherited by the son. And then from a little family it turns into a clan, and so on and so forth. So the first rulers were the kings. So kingdoms, very basic kingdoms, paternal kingdoms. After the plains, we have sea empires or maritime empires, the real ones. That's the real deal. In the plains there was production. In the sea there is combat, there is exchange, there is barter. Through the sea, people have been able to get in contact with the ones that are not like themselves, in very broad terms. So as a result, the human is a political, a societal being. They live together, they do division of labor, and they organized a common living ground. What does this common living ground need for it to be continuous? It needs laws made by men. And who's going to protect these laws? The main studies on this topic say the following: laws are made by men, and despite the fact that they know that, laws are always made by the spirit of the ancestors, the ones that have been deceased. The laws are made by God, the laws are made by spirit, by the jinn. That's how people accepted it. Laws are not made by men. Why? Because for the law you need to bow and surrender on a voluntary basis. And for voluntary submission and surrender, you need authority. This is why you need a team together with the authority figure, whoever that is. So we first have crime. What is crime? Very roughly, the violation of a law. And petty crime, what is that? For example, if you're involved in a traffic accident, who is responsible? Who is the perpetrator? For example, if somebody kills a person, a pedestrian, on the street in a traffic accident, then the driver is considered to be the perpetrator. And then there are petty crimes. For example, if you spit on the floor, is that a crime? If I spit here on stage, is that a crime? No, that would be an offense. So what is that? An even more important word is a sin. This is why the fact that there are unseen authority figures that need to be feared and respected behind the law, and I'm not talking about law enforcement. Nobody is gonna stay away from killing somebody if they want to because they're afraid of the police, but they're gonna stay away from killing someone because they are afraid of God or they are afraid of Allah. In that regard, the concept of sin comes about. So a crime means direct violation of law. An offense or a petty crime means violation of rules that do not have a punishment that follows. a penal punishment that falls. They won't go into jail, but they will lose their reputation. For example, you are all watching television, something happens, for example, one singer gets in an argument and a fight with her boyfriend, for example, and does something that society is not accepting of, and then the entire reputation of that person, the career, is ruined because of one word that he might have uttered. Are we a forgiving society? Let's assume somebody, a journalist, what have you, somebody, it doesn't really matter, said something awful, for example, about a specific celebrity or a person. Do you think that that person will be able to appear on television again? No, he will be punished for that, but not in the criminal sense, but in the society sense. And if you offend God, that is of course a sin in itself, and you will definitely be excluded by society. Back in the day, we used to have initiation ceremonies. They still have them in sects. Initiation ceremonies mean that you need to prove yourself in order to be accepted into a specific society. Before you do that, for example, you are born into a specific tribe, because before you are initiated, you won't get a girl to marry. Think of a boy, for example, 15 years of age, but he hasn't proven that he's a man yet, so he won't be given a woman, neither will he be given a piece of land. So how is he going to prove himself worthy of that? He's going to prove himself worthy of getting all of these things by proving that he's able to fight in a war, and that he's able to stand his ground and fight for his tribe, and so on and so forth. And those initiation ceremonies, they are really serious business. Many people take away serious damages and injuries if they don't die. For example, there is one particular ceremony I remember that takes place in Iran, where they smash your head, and if you survive that, you're initiated, and that takes in Iran, and unless your head bleeds, you won't get a woman to marry, and that all happens in the rural part of the country. The urban Shiites are not really accepting of these ceremonies, but in rural areas, bleeding or blood is considered to be part of any initiation process. By letting blood, the boy signals that he is willing to shed blood for a specific cause. In some areas, for example, 10-year-old boys are left alone in the forest. They need to take care of themselves. They need to be able to steal, to become a good warrior. They need to learn how to kill. But the most important thing they need to learn is not to die themselves. So when you leave that boy in the forest, that's everything that he needs to do. Only after he survives the forest, the time in the forest, he will be initiated into society. Think of Anatolia, for example. No boy in Anatolia gets a girl to marry unless he has completed his military service. And there are still ceremonies when somebody is sent off to the military. So he's gonna go to the military service and then come back a man. So this is why military service against payment is something that is not considered honorable in Anatolia or in villages. That's only for those that live in cities. Even the villagers that live in the cities, they, since they're not gonna go back to their villages, they might serve their military service against payment, but the ones that live in the villages, they won't do that because it's not honorable. What about time? 5:15 already? Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna come to the conclusion then. So this is initiation. Initiation into society. Initiation in the sense that you are fully in full possession of your mental and intellectual and also other faculties. So per law, you are considered an adult when you reach the age of 18. Maturation, bodily maturation, and also mental maturation. For example, in Islam, adolescence and sexual fertility are considered the main features of maturation. For example, criminal liability comes about with your capacity, if you are a girl, to bear children, to give birth. So the capacity for reproduction is crucial here. Before that or without that, a girl is not able to become a woman, a boy is not able to become a man. Is that enough? Is that sufficient? No. The right to appeal is also important. For example, according to modern law, if somebody has mental problems, he might be exempted from certain penal codes, for example. But no lawyer or no judge is really in a position to explain to you what temyiz is in Ottoman. So it has to be explained via the opposite way. In ancient societies, there is the concept of maturation. What happens afterwards? It's the acceptance in society. Society accepts that person when the person is initiated. They go to war, they can buy land, they can get a woman, they can participate in ceremony. And society, once accepting, can also exclude that person again. For example, people are able to become Muslims very quickly. There is entrance, but getting out of Islam is very difficult. Why do you think that is? Of course, this is worthy of further analysis. These are difficult issues to discuss, but being excluded from religions is really an issue that we've been witnessing for many centuries. Think of Italy or Spain, and so on and so forth. Many prominent figures have been excluded from their own religions. Every society has the right to accept people into the religion and also exclude them. So the same holds true for Islam. Islam sets forth its own rules. You can enter through this way, but if you commit such and such crimes, or offenses, we can exclude you. So excluding from society it's as if you were excluded from citizenship. You remember the case of Cem Karaca, for example, during the 12th of September. This has a name. And I'm gonna use Hegel's wording here. Tanınmak, being recognized. So in order for all of you to be able to live in this society, we need how many digits? 10? A 10 digit, 11 digit identity number. I've memorized mine. Instead of constantly looking at your ID and quoting the number, I've memorized mine. 11 digits. In order to be able to accept it to society, you need to have this 11-digit identity number. Without that, would you be able to function in society? No. So if you become a citizen, the state recognizes you, which is called hükmî şahsiyet. The state recognizes you as a person. You are a citizen, you have the right to vote, you have the right to become a candidate during elections, for example. So the state recognizes you. If you tell them your identity number, they recognize you. So being part of society is a matter of recognition and recognizing, but this recognition is a legal recognition. If you are in front of a judge, you are a being that is also punishable. You are a person. You are a legal person. This can be in form of a witness, it can be in form of the accused, you name it, it doesn't really matter. But the important thing here is, with all its advantages and disadvantages, that the state recognizes you. Without you being recognized, you don't even have a place in the cemetery. You don't exist. So if the state recognizes you within the society, and the society recognizes you as well, they can also choose to not recognize you. So where does everything start and where does everything end? In modern societies, thank God, the evolution and development of men, some of you might be offended here, but thanks to the progress that humans made, the concept of citizenship is enough to be recognized. Do you have to be a Muslim, for example, to be recognized as a citizen? No, nowhere. According to universal law, the contract that you sign with the state, it does not take religion into consideration. Usually the religion chapter is not even opened on your identity card. Is it important whether you're a man or a woman? No, gender doesn't play any importance here either. You know very well that being a citizen is sufficient. You don't even have to have a race identity or an ethnic identity. If you want to become a Turkish citizen, do you have to be Turkish? Do you have to be Sunni Muslim or Muslim in general? No. What's Turkish? So we have Armenian citizens, Jewish citizens, they call themselves Turkish as well. In what sense? No, Turkish means that you are a Turkish citizen, a citizen of the Turkish state. But the Turkishness here, so that we can separate it from the citizenship issue, requires further illumination in the following sense. Jewish citizens of Turkey that emigrated to Israel after many, many years, or Armenians that went back to Armenia, Russians that went back to Russia, I'm reading their memoirs. For example, Ibrahim Tatlıses goes to Israel and he's welcomed as if he were in Turkey. They listen to the same music, they eat the same food, they use the same words, they have a similar understanding of issues, and so on. So, apart from belonging to a society on a legal basis, you also have to belong to that society on a cultural basis as well. So this is why these people consider themselves Turkish. They have their own culture, they have their own language, but they also belong to the culture that of the country that they have spent their entire life in. They eat the same food, they express themselves in the same fashion, their joys, their sorrows, and so on and so forth. So this means that when we come back to the question, what is a human being? Well, I've talked and talked, I know that, but we can basically say that the human being is a speaking being, a societal and a political being, and also on top of that, the humankind is a cultural being as well. So speaking and understanding means that the species of the human is a species that incorporates knowledge, but by being a cultural and political being as well, it also has a specific etiquette that he abides by. So ethics and adab, code of conduct maybe. Ahlak in Turkish, or ethics, or virtuous or virtue, is a concept that may change from country to country or society to society. When I was a child, people weren't able to divorce for 40-50 years. Nowadays it's only one day. Do you think that men and women are able to live together in one house without getting married today? Yes, but back in the day, not really. A man and a woman wouldn't have been able to go to a hotel and spend the night without being married. That was not possible. And if they weren't married, they couldn't even share a room. Today, concepts of crime, offense, petty crime, and so on and so forth, they constantly change and evolve from society to society, and also within one single society over a period of, let's say, 50 years. Ethics and I want to reference Plato here, is the non-written part of your law. So if you violate your written laws, you have committed a crime. But there are also non-written laws. If you violate them, you have committed ayıp, which is a violation of virtue. and they are not sent to prison. But what they do, what society does if somebody has committed a yip, is that they turn their back on that person and they exclude that person. So you will have to face society. It will be society versus you. So the most important part, I believe, but I also have to admit, this is something I have come to realize very late. The person, the human being, is a zoon politikon, it's a societal being, and so on and so forth. It's a cliche, it's something that everybody knows by now. But the human being is at the same time somebody or a person that fights society, a thinking being, but most of the people do not think. How are we supposed to explain that? I owe a lot to Kant in that sense, because Kant very frankly said that society came about because of this dilemma that human beings incorporate. So on the one hand side, people are societal beings that wants to live in a city, but on the other hand side, they want to escape to the mountains. So one part hates society, the other part cannot survive without society. So it's a dilemma that human beings incorporate within themselves. So it's like a cell. The human being is like a cell. Without metabolism, can there be a cell? No. Why do we have cells? For metabolism. So this is Bergson's analysis. The human being is societal and individualism is a fairy tale. I'm not sure whether that's truly entirely correct, but we can compare the human being to a cell. If society is a metabolism, the human being is a cell. And because of its nature, the cell is for the metabolism, so the human being is for society. But we have the following dilemma here, a contradiction. Do you think that one cell can say, I don't care about metabolism, I don't care about metabolism? Is that possible, do you think? Can you think of such a situation? So when people are excluded from church, for example, is that something that cells can neglect? A cell that can accept being excluded from metabolism, well, they can accept it, but the result will be disastrous. But the modern being says, I am an individual. In our country, there is almost no individualism at all, because individualism is part of more advanced societies, more advanced cultures. It is a capacity to regulate, well, the last capacity instance of regulating the relationship between a society and the individual, the metabolism and the cell. Maybe in Scandinavian countries we can talk of individualism in the real sense. We don't hesitate with doing away with the individual, and metabolism owes much to non-intellectual efforts. I mentioned the witches and the like. You can count in religious people and the priests and so on and so forth as well. But because of the current situation of Turkey, which is a little backwards, the class of witches and magicians has been strengthened. This is why in sects they have sheikhs or there are gurus. Those people are, or at least that's what they say, is against the development of the human being. If you act according to what comes out of the mouth of another being, that harms your personality. In exchange for what? So you've been initiated in initiation ceremonies to be accepted to society. You lose a limb, you go into the forest and try to survive. What is that person after? They're trying to gain something in exchange of losing something. So in exchange for an identity, they trade in their personality. So becoming part of society also means that you lose your personality. Do you have a personality in the military? The women won't know? No. Your personality is crushed in the military so that you become part of a flock, you become part of a large group. You cannot tell anyone that you're not gonna get up at the set time or that you're not going to eat such and such food. You have to obey under each and every circumstance. You have to put aside your personality in order to function as part of a larger group. In favor for what? In favor of metabolism of society. This is called görgü in Turkish. These are societal behavioral patterns. This is called tin. I like beans, for example. I like rice on the side and tzatziki. I think everyone is hungry, right? This is my objective spirit. But you can argue that everyone in Turkey likes beans. Well, that's true, because that's also an objective tin. I like a tomato salad, for example. Tomato salad, is that my personality or my identity that loves çoban salata? Tomato salad, cucumber tomato salad, chopped. Lahmacun, everyone likes it, but what about smoked salmon? So if you come to nesnel tin, equals adab or edep in Turkish. Or terbiye. This is how far I have come with the subject in 1.5 hours. Usually I don't finish under 3 hours, but we did good. We did good without touching the subject. I talked and talked without getting into the subject. And the reason is because I have to sit here. I want to put one leg on top of the other, but I try to sit orderly. Why did I choose this subject to begin with before I finish? Our cultural landscape is perforated already. The way of living, our way of life is perforated. Öz yurdumda parya means like kingdom in my own country. I feel like an alien in my own city where I was born and raised. In the subway, in the bus, on the street, on the boat, on the ferry, I try to get in contact with the people, but unfortunately I see that a lot of things divide us, they separate us. I feel like a foreigner in the city I was born and raised. I've been living on Büyükada, on the main island of the Princess Islands for the past decade. When you live on an island, you expect a fish and a little røkke on the side when you go out to the restaurants. But when you go to Büyükada today, you don't feel as if you were on an island. It has the same feeling as if you were strolling İstiklal Caddesi, the main pedestrian street beginning in Taksim. And at a very, very, ugly level, I think. Nobody recognizes anyone. There is no societal feeling at all. Because when you belong to a society, you get in contact with people. You are being recognized. And görgü, that means societal rules of behavior and conduct, should not be ignored. If the person next to you is screaming off of the top of his lungs in a very, very ugly manner, then we cannot talk about görgü anymore. If somebody is smoking horribly next to you, and despite your intervention that you are an asthma patient, for example, he ignores you, you cannot talk about görgü anymore. So this is the society of Turkey. Society of Turkey sounds odd, but we are losing something, or we've already lost a lot of things. We lost in politics. The last 15 years were horrible because of that. The first round in the 90s, the second round with the new millennium, and there is no common language, no common political attitude or political görgü or adab. Everyone talks behind the backs of anyone. Well, initially I mentioned that the human being is a speaking and a thinking being. Do you know what that means? It means that everything that I've tried to outline and picture in this short period of time, the very basic foundation of being a human being is language. And Heidegger says language is the container of being. It's the house, it's the hearth of being. That's what Heidegger says. The main reason why we lost our görgü is because we have lost our common language. And by language I do not necessarily mean Turkish. Of course, Turkish to a certain extent. Turkish is important, but by language I mean adab and edeb, societal rules by which to abide, ethical rules by which to abide. So a common language, a common culture, an objective spirit. Let me give you a very basic example. You walk the street and construction workers during their lunch break eat something, bread and cheese and what have you. And usually you would say, when you cross them by, afiyet olsun, right? Enjoy. And what would they say? Hey, come beraber olsun, sit. So this is lost. This is lost. This is automatic. This is automatic. Something you would say to a person that you don't know passing by the street. Even the construction worker would invite a bypasser at his table. Do you think that this has something to do with language? No. With Turkish, I mean language. I remember quite well non-Muslims in Istanbul, especially during Ramadan, would be very courteous and respectful towards Muslims that would fast. And Muslim children would eat Easter eggs. I grew up in Fıstık Ağacı, Bağlarbaşı in Üsküdar, in Skutariye. This was our environment that we grew up in, a common language, and this common language changed with modernization. And what do we have now? Selamun aleyküm, afiyet olsun is lost, but now we cut off the road and on the roads, for example. And the construction worker that used to say, hey, come sit and have a bite to eat, gets on his truck and turns into a beast on the road because it's a new culture. It's something that he is not familiar with. So ethics are on the level, on the dimension of personality, but edep and adab are the protectors of akhlaq. So if you cannot preserve courtesy and respect, you won't be able to protect akhlaq, which are ethical norms. So if people are neglecting, they won't respect your rights. If they don't think of the neighbor, whether they are disturbing the neighbor by playing loud music, if they're not considerate enough, he's not acting against ethics, but he's against common rules of living together. And the next time, or the next version would be committing a crime, for example. So we're still in a position where we, thank God, haven't yet lost akhlaq, ethical norms, but edep is seriously in a deconstructing phase. I'm not sure whether my speech was interesting enough, but thank you very, very much for respectfully listening to me. Thank you. Okay, so we have 15 minutes left. It's 5:45. I was supposed to receive the questions on the app. How is this supposed to work? Can somebody help? Maybe we can receive questions like this from the audience live, if there is a microphone. You can ask questions right now if you like. I cannot hear the speaker anymore. So if you're not working, you won't receive a woman. different religions, political views, and so on and so forth, the Turkish society. What will be the common denominator that will keep the fabric of the Turkish society together? What should the common denominator be? Tradition, rituals are by nature products of compromise, so we need to respect those traditions and rituals. But laws have an intellectual foundation. Human beings will get a feeling of being home, of arriving home through intellectual efforts. So living together is still possible here, and this thanks to the laws. For example, the Republic of Turkey is a Muslim Sunni law. If they removed that, could you think of a stronger country? That's, for example, true in Iran. Iran has an official religion, Jafirism. And I remember during the years of Khomeini, he put it in the constitution, and we're quite surprised. How is it possible that he separated Sunnis and Shiites? And he introduced the Shiism as the official religion of Iran. What if the same happened in Turkey? The Turkish Republic, the Republic of Turkey, is a Sunni Islamic republic, or Hanafi, or what have you. Do you think that would foster, that would enhance our living together, or weaken it? So, society's fabric, that which will keep us together, should be based on universal values. And universal values are human experiences. If you take that into consideration, you will see that ruling a country and ruling a society is not possible via one single like religion. Which one is more successful? Think of Saudi Arabia or Iran. You have religious law. Think of Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Norway, Sweden. Can they claim, can Saudi Arabia and Iran claim that they are ruled by better laws? Law doesn't need to be sanctified or praised. Life itself needs to be praised. Of course, capital has been praised, so everything has an economic dimension. Why does a society need to become intellectual? Why why do politics need to be predictable? Because nobody wants to invest their money in an unforeseeable future. This is why intellectual capacity is the foundation, is the basis of any modern society. And if you reach that level, it is beneficial to humankind. Islam was not able to provide laws that prohibit slavery. Islamists would go back to slavery if they could. But human consciousness was successful enough to abolish slavery. This is why and this is only recent history, we shouldn't be afraid, because we did it once. We need to believe in the development of humankind. Well, it's a slow development, unfortunately, but as long as it's based on intellectualism, then everything will be fine. If you insist on particular laws not to be changed, then this will be disastrous. Changing laws stems from your personal experience. Let me tell you something very, very basic, very simple. Unfortunately, accession talks, accession negotiations were stopped to the European Union. If you kick a dog, is that punishable or not? If it were up to us, do you think we would decide in favor? No. We imported certain laws which we would have been unable to adopt ourselves and draft ourselves. And this is why I still believe that intellectualism combined with experience, but intellectualism respecting experience. Traditions excluding intellectualism, they include intellectual properties up to a certain point, but after that they lose it. For example, mihir. Mihir means endowment in exchange for marrying off your daughter. Insisting on laws that have lost their intellectual foundation is a reflection of ignorance. Ignorance of societal mechanisms. For example, the term interest is explained with modern terminology. And the interest riba in Islam does not have anything to do with the interest rate of today. Is it possible for non-urban citizens to rule a country? That's how we are ruled. I think we have 24 or something mayors from Trabzon. How is this possible? Well, if you think of it, you will laugh. What are ways of getting self-consciousness? Oh, thank you for reminding me. I've talked about the content, self-consciousness and etiquette. I haven't even touched on these two concepts. I think I should close with that. I've used up everything. I've used up everything in the past 1.5 hours that was necessary for me to explain to you what self-consciousness is. The speaker needs to speak into a microphone. He stepped away from the microphone. ÖZBİLİNÇ, or self-consciousness, or Selbstbewusstsein in German, means a full grasp of oneself. In Turkish, we have one equivalent for that, irfan. Having irfan and having ÖZBİLİNÇ, that is self-consciousness, is the same thing. Being recognized and recognizing, as you may remember. Self-consciousness means empathizing with other people, being able to step into other people's footsteps. For example, I'm speaking here and you are listening, and I try to foresee how I will be perceived. For example, if I make a joke of people from the Black Sea, or if I said something bad about Kurds, or if I said, well, I cannot refrain from telling whatever is on my mind, I would be lacking self-consciousness, because that would mean that I do not have insight into my own heart. So, ilim, alim, and malum. But whoever is arif, that means smart or intelligent, always considers other people too. So somebody may tell something bad about you and you may respond or react. Or maybe that person that talks bad about you is very sorrowful, has undergone a loss. If you were to empathize with that person, then maybe you wouldn't get angry. Seeing your own reflection in somebody else. This is the highest level of societal consciousness, self-consciousness. If you spit on the floor, other people might step on it. You need to think about whether other people will step on it. If you scream around, then you need to think about whether that will disturb somebody else. If you did that, you wouldn't scream, because if other people scream, I get disturbed. It bothers me. So this is a very simple relation here. Please take a look at your environment from that perspective. How many people do you know that empathize with other people and that are considerate enough? You will be disappointed if you are looking for people that have irfan, that have this self-consciousness. Back in the day, there used to be 3 categories. The one category was the ulema, the intellectuals of society, if I may say so. The second category would be the urefa category. Urefa means the ones that are arif, the people that have that aforementioned self-consciousness. And we had the zurefa category, the ones that are zarif, that are elegant or considerate. Avam means a commoner, and Allah'lık adam, a man of God, means gentleman. What's the relationship? Allah'lık adam means the one that goes to paradise. The Mevlevi are always considered to be Çelebi in the meaning of gentleman. Çelebi comes from Çalat, and Çalat comes from Allah, and Allah'lık adam, man of God, indicates a gentleman. Anateios. Allah'lık adam, a man like God. So the arif, the sheikh, and the ones that have hikmet are usually thought of in the first place when you think of Çelebi, but no, that's not the case. It was used for those that are respectful and considerate in society. So in Western language, the mot à mot, one-to-one literal translation would be gentleman. A gentle person, a respectful person, a considerate person is not necessarily an ethically good person. For example, the French people are very gentle, but not necessarily abiding by the rules of ethics. The Germans are not necessarily gentle or elegant, however, they abide by the rules. So you can be fooled by a merchant in a very elegant way, but a Laz merchant will be very rough, but they won't fool you. Honesty gives you two features. Honesty gives you coarseness, because if you're honest, you say what's on your mind. An honest person, an authentic person does not have self-consciousness. So the Laz merchant does not have self-consciousness because he won't be able to empathize with the customer. And the second feature is vulnerability. Honest people are easily disappointed because life in the cities is not suitable to honesty. For example, when you choose your friends, do you choose from the honest but coarse ones? Or do you choose the elegant and smart ones? What would you prefer? Or your life partner? Very elegant, very gentleman-like, but cheating. Or would you prefer the opposite? Or would you prefer the honest version? The typical Turkish man. No elegance, no gentleness. Do you love me? What do you mean? Of course I love you. If he were only able to empathize with the woman that he loves, the woman would know and have a confirmation of the fact that she is loved. Even if the man doesn't love the woman, if he's elegant and gentle enough, tells her lies. This is called complimenting. Oh, my lady, you are beautiful today. You have wonderful earrings. Oh, don't compliment me. Oh, this is not a compliment, this is the truth. That's what they say, if the person is elegant. Okay, the only thing I want to say is something by Balzac. Nobody can resist compliments. Every person longs for compliments. So being praised, especially women, is something that everyone wants. So elegance and being considerate has to do something with etiquette. Ethics are important. Everybody likes compliments. Do compliments need to be truthful? No, they don't. It's a way of establishing a far superior relationship. How do you stay in such a relationship? You gain experience. You gain that experience when you're in a relationship. You cannot observe that in nature. In nature, you get in contact with the ones that are not like you, with animals and plants, but in the cities you get together with the ones that are like you, and you have to get to know them, and once you get to know them you create self-consciousness. That is the foundation of society. Society's foundation is self-consciousness. What was the name of Cemil Meriç's book? Umrandan Uygarlığa. What was the other one? Kültürden irfana. So he's arguing that culture is the opposite of irfan, and umran and urfan. Let's hope we all live in a society where self-consciousness is held very dear. Thank you very much and have a good evening.